ado, I'd like to introduce Lukas.
My name's Lukas. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Josh, for that glowing endorsement. My sobriety date is July the 28th of 2010, and for that small amount of time, I'm truly as grateful as I know how to be. Alcoholics Anonymous revolutionized my life, and I wish I could give more glamorous words, more glamorous outpouring as to how that has transpired and how that continues to transpire. But I woke up this morning, and I had to ask myself, what is a guy like me doing here? I shared this morning briefly, and I'll share it again. I came to this conference when I was 16 years old. My sponsor at the time said we were going with his sponsor. If we didn't show up at 6:45 a.m., he was going to leave us. And I thought, wow, this simmer down. And I remember getting in that car, and I was just so tight. And we walk into this conference room, and there's an older woman up at the podium. And I'm prejudiced when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I walk into that room, the first thing I see is a woman that doesn't understand what I've been through. And she's also older than me, so she has no idea the experiences in which I've been through. Contempt prior to investigation. And she gets up to the podium, and she describes that the alcoholic soul is as black as night. And we die so hard. In that moment, I knew that woman had experienced everything I'd experienced, not in a reality level, but in an emotional and a spiritual toll. That she knew the circumstances of my life, she had that experience. And she said it like Braveheart, in case you know what I'm talking about. And here I am a small amount of time later. A transformation has taken place in my life. Anytime I get asked to participate in service in Alcoholics Anonymous, I like to let everybody know that I got sober at the age of 15 and I'm currently 27 years old. I don't say that to brag. I don't say that to prove that I'm better than you. I say that to show that the disease of alcoholism affects anybody, regardless of your age, your race, your gender, your creed, or your religion. And the second reason I say that is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works for anybody, regardless of, yet again, your age, your race, your gender, your creed, or your religion. Thank God. You know, when I got asked to come up here and share, it was a few years ago, to say lightly. But the wait is finally over. And if you think at the end of me talking that, wow, they got to have something better than this, please just stay. We got Marie, we got Gary, we got Joe, we got Melissa. We got a great group of people here. And I'm so excited to participate in sharing that. I want to thank the entire committee. I want to thank everybody who's translating, who's doing the sign language. I want to thank Mike for taping. He's a modern day AA historian. When we leave this conference on Sunday, that's it. But we'll have an opportunity to pick up one of those CDs, one of those USBs, and say, wow, gosh, I remember when I heard Lukas at the Maryland State Convention. You don't have to buy my CD, just buy a CD. And if I'm forgetting anybody, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So I've been asked to share in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. And I can tell you, growing up, I've always felt apart from, not a part of in every aspect of my life. In a book, A New Pair of Glasses, he talks about this conscious separation. What a guy like me yearns for is conscious connection. If there's this giant circle with everything I think I need, want, or want to participate in the middle, I'm always on the outside looking in. I'm never at the right place or the right time. Or at the right time, excuse me. And I went on like that for such a small period of time in my life. And then the stars aligned. Right around the holiday season, I was 12 years old, and I got hooked up with Monica, Trevor, and Brendan. We went behind the woods at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. You are a Goucher alum, I apologize. And I can remember going into that experience, if Monica, Trevor, and Brendan knew who I really was, they would want nothing to do with a loser like me. And the only reason I feel that way is because I want nothing to do with a loser like me. And out from Brendan's black Jansport backpack came this sweaty, lukewarm bottle of Mad Dog 2020. Sometimes you walk into an AA meeting if you don't know it's an AA meeting. But the moment you mention Mad Dog 2020, you hear moans, you hear, yeah, it sounds like a low-grade porn video. You guys have seen porn, good. And decipher that. And gosh, I was so scared, and that got passed to me. And I took a pull from that bottle, and I took several more pulls throughout that evening. And I don't know what it is, but it happened. It happened. All of a sudden, that thought process was, if they really knew who I was, if Monica, Trevor, and Brendan really knew who I was, they would want nothing to do with a loser like me. Instantaneously changed to, you guys are so lucky I'm here right now. First psychic change. First experience, spiritual in nature. And gosh, going into that situation, Monica was the best looking girl I went to school with. You remember going to school doing the top 5 most attractive people you go to school with list? She's top 5. And Brendan, he was just the funniest guy I went to school with. And Trevor, he was the best looking guy I went to school with. But for some reason, on that night, at that moment in time, when I took that drink of Mad Dog 2020, all that changed. I was better looking, I was worth dating, and I was more funny, more needed. I was everything that I thought I needed to be. And I was everything I thought you wanted me to be. And I'd like to tell you that all this time later, that after that night I proved to them I was better looking, funnier, and I started hooking up with Monica. But gosh, that was over 15 years ago, and I'm here to tell you 15 years later, Trevor's still the best looking guy I know. Brendan's still the funniest guy I know, does comedy out in California, makes a killing. And Monica has a boyfriend, it's just not me. Yeah. So if you want to be the least funny, most unattractive, permanently single, recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a program that will change your life this afternoon. If you don't want at least 2 of them, including the recovered part, I just can't help you. You're going to have to ask guys like Josh, Melissa, Gary. They're your people. And I know at that moment I had found everything that I ever thought I needed. And I chased alcohol with a vigor that I had never chased anything before in my life. And I was very young when I started drinking, but I took every ample opportunity to experience alcohol. And I could sit up here and tell you some wet and wild stories about what happened to a guy like me when I drank. But my drinking's perfectly described in the doctor's opinion. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effects produced by alcohol. I drink to get right. I drink to get right. I'm not one of these people that when they take a drink say things like my brother does, you know, I've got work tomorrow morning, I've got to stop. Yeah. I've got a family obligation important in nature that I need to be at. Or the worst, they're like, you know, I'm starting to feel it. That's when you get in the game. That's when you've leveled up. But those people don't drink to get right. They don't have this nervous disposition. They don't feel apart from it in every aspect of their life. And after that, it says the sensation is so elusive that even though it is injurious after a time, it cannot differentiate truth from the false, or alcoholic life seems the only normal one. The sensation I experienced behind the woods at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland is essentially the sensation I've been trying to chase every time I took a drink after that. Every time I'm trying to recapture that moment, that experience, that time and place, and it never hit the mark. It never hit the mark. And it tells me, to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. There are these lines in the sand a guy like me will never cross. Yeah, I'm never going to do this. If I get to this point, I'll just stop. See, the scary part about that is I think that I have the power to just stop. And I get up to this line in the sand. And for those of you who've seen the Indiana Jones series, the young kid that says booty traps, you know, he's very tedious around those lines. A guy like me kind of pitter-patters around them, and towards the end of my drinking, I'm like a buzzsaw hitting a plank of wood. I just go right through. I can't stop. I won't stop. I don't stop. I'm a real alcoholic. I drink anytime I want to, even if you tell me to stop. But the scary part about that is I'm real alcoholic. I drink anytime I don't want to, and I can't stop. I cannot stop. It says they're restless, irritable, and discontented. That describes me, physically sober, removed from a solution. What does that mean for someone like me? Restless. I'm unable to rest or relax. We know who they are. They show up to your home group. Their coffee cup won't stop shaking. They're moving their legs at 1,000,000 miles a second. You ask them how they're doing. Great, just fine. Couldn't be better. Yeah. I'm irritable. I'm easily agitated or annoyed. I had a couple people come up to me, wow, Lucas, that's a nice tie. What do you mean? What do you mean it's a nice tie? It's a great tie. And I'm discontented. I'm unsatisfied, dissatisfied, and unhappy with the life that I live. If I've just described you, if you just quick class participation, could you just raise your hand if I've described you coming into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, removed from a solution? Wow, some people got it going on. And it says, unless I can experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a drink, drinks they see others taking with impunity. I become separated from alcohol in these time periods of my life. I bounced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous from ages 12 to 15. And I was blessed to meet beautiful women like Millie, like Pat, men like Duke, men like Stu. There's a couple more of you here, not good vision. And you guys did the same thing every time. You sat me down, you got a cup of coffee, you opened a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you qualified me, and you said, hey, look, this is what we have to offer. If you don't want it, we can't help you. Just that simple. If you don't want it, we can't help you. Whiskey has to do its job. I need to be beaten into a state of reasonableness. And in these brief moments of sobriety when I don't want what you have because I'm better than you, I'm different, you don't understand me, I become restless and irritable and discontented, and I want to experience this sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. And I become convinced that this was all just a big mistake. I'm just a teenager. Everybody has a rough go of it. My mom and my dad, they need to get off my back. Cops, just misunderstandings. And I get thirsty. I get thirsty. And then it says, after they succumb to the desire, so many do. Bill and these first 100 members use beautiful language. It's not saying if I succumb to the desire, the possibility that I'll succumb to the desire after. It's a foregone conclusion if I'm a real alcoholic, described in the doctor's opinion, the mental obsession paired with a physical compulsion. If the urge is on, I'm not going to be able to hit a couple squats, throw up a couple weights, and it just goes away. And what happens for a guy like me is the phenomenon of craving develops. I start to think I need more. This idea that if I just had one drink to take the edge off starts to become I need more. I never drank to take the edge off. I drank to put the edge on. Completely different from my fellows. It says they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. Alcoholism is experiential. At the end of that spree, the people that you and I came in front of may be completely different, and that's okay. But for me, I usually wound up in front of a police officer, some person that worked at a psych ward, or worse, my mom and my dad. Ugh. And what happens is I give them this 100-point page paper about how it's never going to happen again. How that it was Pat's fault. How it was Millie's fault. How it was those people in my life that just forced me to do the wrong thing again. That I just got to stay away from them. And the worst part about stuff like that is when I become convinced that that's what the issue is, my family starts to become convinced that that is truly what the issue is. And they're ready to get taken through the ringer one more time. And it says this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire, if I ordered a pizza and I ate the entire pizza, there would be none left. That is entire. an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. Dr. Silkworth has just decreed a guy like me a death sentence because alcoholics die. We don't come in here and just get to say, you know what, I've had a couple good months of it, I'm just going to leave and I'll come back in a couple weeks. I don't have that luxury. And that's the way that my drinking looks over and over and over and over again. And what my household looks like on a regular basis is I come home intoxicated at all hours of the night, even though my mom tells me that is not acceptable behavior. And I come home and I get into it again because she says something. And the next thing I know, I'll wind up throwing a fist at my mom and hitting her. And then my grandparents are staying with us to try and help my mom raise us. And my grandfather and my grandmother try to peel me off of my mom. And then my brother comes flying down the steps. And with all his God-given might, he throws me off of my mom and he lays on top of me. And my brother knew I was dying of alcoholism long before I ever realized I suffered from it. And I can tell you, I remember what it feels like to have his warm tears running down the back of my neck, begging me, Luke, please stop. I don't want to hurt you. And getting out of his grip and walking to my front door. And every time I walked to my front door after a situation like that, I would always tell myself, just keep going through the door, don't look back. And then you turn around and I see my mom sitting there on the ground crying and my grandparents consoling her. My brother's sitting there with his hands over his arm, or his hands over his head, just being like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? That's what I bring Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not gonna shy away from saying things like that, and I'm not embarrassed to say things like that. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get right. And I'm willing to share my brokenness with somebody in hopes that they understand that they're not terminally unique and they can recover for the same thing I've recovered from. And after I leave my house, I find myself wandering around the most gutless areas of Baltimore. And my mom calls my dad, and my dad drives up from Ocean City to try and come find me. And my dad scours throughout the night looking for me. And my dad does what a guy like him knows how to do. You know, he grew up in a working class generation, type of guy, show up to work at work, leave work when you're supposed to. And he finds me, and he just grabs a hold of me, and he just starts shaking me. What are you trying to do to this family? Why won't you stop? I'm not trying to do anything. And I can stop when I want. I can stop when I want. And that happened over and over again. And just repeat. And what happened on July 27th of 2010, the day before I got sober, what my life had landed me is I'm the type of guy, if I metaphorically walk into a bar and alcoholism is the bartender, and I say, hey, bartender, I need a drink. Alcoholism says it's going to cost you. You know, tonight I'm going to need your family. Tonight I'm going to need your friends. Tonight I'm going to need your intimate relationships. And then once I give all that stuff away, and hear me say this, I gave that stuff away for the price of a drink. I didn't lose the love of my family. I didn't lose the respect of my friends. I didn't lose intimate relationships. I freely gave that away because I want to drink. Once all those things are gone, I start giving away my dignity, my integrity, my respect. And when I give those things away, I'm here to tell you that I am all in on participating, bear witnessing to, and engaging in some unspeakable things. On July 27th of 2010, I woke up convinced that I needed to stop drinking. It was another one of those rough nights. You wake up, you don't know what's happened, and you don't want to hear what's happened because you can imagine it's going to be something. And about an hour later, I always have this strange sensation where I start to think again, gosh, that's the worst idea ever. I shouldn't stop. Yeah. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Let's go. And then I get right. And early in the afternoon on July 27th of 2010, I'm involved in an altercation in which a young man's murdered, and I have to answer for that. And I come to on July 28th of 2010 in a hospital not knowing what's happened, being informed of what's just transpired. And it wasn't the fact that I had done something like that, it's the fact that I had no recollection or no witness to what I had just participated in. Bill talks about a price had to be paid. What price are you willing to pay to drink, and what price are you willing to stay here? I'm willing to pay any price to drink. When I came to on July 28th of 2010 and you had told me what happened, I wasn't saying, well, I need to call Alcoholics Anonymous. There's probably a great intergroup rep that can get me to an excellent meeting. I'd experienced the desperation of drowning men. It talks about being beaten into a state of reasonableness. ... Sometimes this was a tedious process. I had been beaten into a state of reasonableness, and I didn't want what Alcoholics Anonymous had to offer, but I wanted to escape the absolute nightmare I'd been living in. And I was willing to do anything at that time, I thought, to get that. And I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous, and the good standing members of Alcoholics Anonymous did the same thing. They put a big book in front of me. They qualified me to be here. They got a cup of coffee for me. And they asked me if I was willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol. It says in how it works, if you decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Those are questions. Do you want what someone like me has, and are you willing to go to any length to get it? If you don't answer yes to both of those questions, why are we here? Why are we meeting? Why are we sitting down? And I started showing up to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to answer for those crimes that I had committed, and I found myself in a lockdown facility up here in Catoctin, Maryland. Catoctin, Maryland, that's what it's called. And Deshu talked about it, that young lady and that elderly gentleman that had the oxygen container with him that showed up there on a weekly basis, we just figured that out, and weekly basis to try and pass a message to somebody who frankly might not want to hear it. And what happened for a guy like me, there's a beautiful man that lives here in Frederick, and he came up there every Sunday morning with his wife. Yet again, contempt prior to investigation. He showed up to this meeting. He was wearing a polo. His hair was cut. He was neatly groomed. He wore khaki shorts, and he wore Ugg slippers. No. Not this. This guy, contempt prior to investigation. And him and his wife show up, and no matter what I said to them, no matter how ignorant I got, they were there. They were happy to be there. I just felt like they showed up every Sunday. They said, that kid Lukas is going to have something to say. We're going to have to listen to it one more time, but we're going to get him. And kudos to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is the only place where the more broken you come in, the more excited we are to see you. Show up to meetings and there's that train wreck guy shaking in the back of the meeting. Hey, my name's so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. At the end of the meeting, we're on him like glue. I thought men were recruiting me in Alcoholics Anonymous like I was a high school prospect like LeBron James. They were like, God, can we take you to this meeting? Come to the diner with us. You want to go bowling? Have you worked the steps? Are you sponsored? Are you sponsored? Are you sponsored? Who's your sponsor? It's like, give me a minute, guys. And they show me what it meant to live with integrity. They show me what it meant to practice these principles in all their affairs. They show me that love and tolerance was our code. And that one day John spoke and he talked about getting sober, I believe at the age of 17 or 18, and I thought, holy crap, this guy's just like me. I might have a shot. And I came back here to Baltimore, Maryland, not here, but I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Not like the tough part of Baltimore, Maryland, like the scary part. I'm like from the weak, unicorn, rainbows part. It said on the flyer that I'm from Towson, so it's a northern suburb of Baltimore County. I was like, gosh, I wish it would have said Baltimore. They would have given me some credit before I ever talked. And I showed up to the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd like to tell you that my story is one of me rising from the ashes like a phoenix. It's not. You ever see the postcards with the sloth hanging on the branch and it says, just hang in there? How are you doing? I'd like to introduce myself. That's me. And what I can tell you is I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My first sponsor was a beautiful man by the name of Rob. He was sponsored by a beautiful man named Rob, and he was sponsored by a beautiful man named Duke, and they did this thing. They did Alcoholics Anonymous the way it is instructed out of our book. And I wasn't for that. I thought that Alcoholics Anonymous was just about not drinking. When you talked about this idea in step 2 that God either is or he is and he's everything or else he's nothing, all I read was God either is or he is and he's everything or else he's nothing when it comes to just our drinking. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. And I found out that drinking alcohol is just a symptom of the underlying spiritual malady I suffer from. Step 3, this idea of making a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand him. I made a decision that I was willing to make a decision, that you were willing to make a decision, that I'd make a decision one day once you made the decision. In case you don't know, I didn't make a decision. Step 4, doing this inventory, I did a shallow and cowardice inventory. I was so ashamed of some stuff that I had done outside of Alcoholics Anonymous before I got sober and after I got sober. And I was so scared to sit across from another man that if I told him that, he'd be like, whoa, this is not the right fellowship for you, dude. You've got to go to like AA.2. And here I am trying to be this tough guy, this alpha and omega, but I'm so scared of what you think of me. I'm willing to be whoever it is I think you want me to be, inside or outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, just so you like me. And you know that world famous fifth step experience where your sponsor's sitting there, he's cried. If you've done a cowardice and shallow inventory, he's probably cried sharing his stuff. You haven't cried at all. And he's like, is there anything that you want to share that you didn't write down? No, man, I'm good. I'm glad you got something out. 6 and 7, everyone here, we agree 6 and 7 is just the free spot on the bingo card, right? Good. 8 and 9, right? I can make a list. 9. I'm the type of guy that when I talk about making direct amends, I'm the type of guy who believes that me just not drinking is an amend. My mom deserves those nights back that she cried herself to sleep. My father deserves the dignity and respect of his son back. My brother deserves every precious moment I stole from him back. So if you think that just not drinking's enough, you'll kill somebody if you say that to him. You'll kill him. 10, 11, and 12, I talked about it earlier. My sponsor said this is 90% of what we do in AA, and I had just done only 10% of it, and I really tried hard at that 10%, so I wasn't ready to do the other 90%. This idea of continuing to take inventory and setting right any new wrong as we go along, forget about it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation. I thought that those all were optional. That all of that's optional. I thought it said sought through prayer or meditation, not prayer and meditation. And then this idea of step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I had a spiritual awakening after going through a cowardice and weak 12-step process. I had an awakening limited in nature. But the one thing that I didn't hear about in AA because I wasn't surrendered enough to hear it, is we have spiritual awakenings in Alcoholics Anonymous, but we fall asleep. We can fall asleep here. And I fell asleep in Alcoholics Anonymous at 6 years, and I can tell you what my life looked like as I was convinced I was a victim of the great idea that I could wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I just managed well. The delusion, not the great idea. I thought it was a great idea. And I become convinced that if I just got the degree, if I just got the relationship, if I just got the job, and I just got the money, it would all make sense. It would all make sense. And coinciding with this period, I'd had the opportunity to start speaking around my area in Alcoholics Anonymous and surrounding areas, and I had nothing to offer. I'd find myself going to meetings, talking from a podium, and I'd have these outer body experiences where I'd be behind me with my arms crossed like, whew, if they only knew you were lying. Dying. Getting sicker and sicker in Alcoholics Anonymous because I have this level of spiritual pride that tells me if I tell somebody that I'm not doing okay, that I'll have to restart all over again, that I'll be punished and banned from AA for a month. I thought we shared our perfection in AA, not our brokenness. And in one foul swoop, what happened for a guy like me is I was going to school for medicine. I had dreams of being a doctor, not because of that's what I wanted to do, but because I was convinced that if I became a doctor, the people in AA and the people in the world would treat me the way I deserved to be treated. I didn't know what that was, but you would treat me that way. I had accumulated some sense of money, and I was spending more money than I brought in because I thought that if I looked the part, you would treat me the part. Sound familiar to anybody? My job, I was suspended from my job. I threatened my boss. While in school for medicine, I was put on academic probation. This relationship that I had had with a beautiful woman outside of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I willingly forfeited that over because of my misconduct inside and outside of AA. One of the sickest things a guy like me has ever done inside and outside of AA, especially inside of AA, is using the amount of time I've had sober and the age in which I got sober to impress upon new women in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll kill somebody doing that. I don't have the power to make anybody drink, but I absolutely have the power to make someone feel uncomfortable as to where they'll never come back to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in my area. And if you think that I'm an anomaly and I'm the only person that's ever done that, it's running rampant. And I lost it all. And I remember showing up to a men's retreat that I go to every year, and I thought, gosh, this is good. This is it. This is the curtain for a guy like me. And you ever hit your knees and pray to God like this? Hey, God, if you don't send me somebody this weekend, I'm leaving. Yeah. Like God's losing his best player if I leave Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyone ever pray like that? And I go to this men's retreat, and it's led by a guy that I love from St. Louis. His name's Harold, and this small person named Cliff from Oklahoma. And I think, gosh, all right, here we go. I'm going to find somebody who's going to change my life. And Harold gets up there, and he starts talking about a cahog. That's a cat combined with a hog, and he's describing it as a spiritual entity. Take that in. I thought to myself, this is obviously not the guy that God has sent me. And my now sponsor, Cliff, gets up there, and he starts sharing his experience, and he starts sharing his brokenness. And he started sharing some things I'd never heard another man share about. I mean, I was sitting in the front row like, shh. And he closed his talk with this. For those of you who've had the great pleasure of meeting, he always closes his eyes and he uses his hands. And he just goes, God's in restoration and business is booming. And I thought, maybe that Cahal guy had something to say. This is not the guy for me. And I sat down with him, and I pulled him aside at the end of the meeting, and I said, hey, man, because I had this thought in my head that it told me, Lukas, if you don't do something different today, you're going to die. And I'd never had a thought like that in my life before. I knew I had to come back to AA when I was 15 years old, but I'd never had that deep of a thought that if I didn't do something or change something today, I was going to die. And I pulled him aside and I said, hey, can we talk? And he said, hey, I want to give you the time that you deserve. I would like to sit down after lunch. So we sat down after lunch. We went to his cabin, and he said, look, if you're not going to do what I tell you to do and take suggestion, you can leave right now. And I thought, God, he was so nice earlier. And I asked him to sponsor me. And I told him what was going on in my life. And he started walking me through the work in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was surrendered in a way I'd never been surrendered before. And my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, my experience has been characterized by a deeper level of surrender, followed by a deeper level of awakening. It's always gone like that. I have not always been on this pinnacle upward trajectory. It's been like the stock market, relatively steady, deep crash, deep crash, deep crash, deep crash, coming back up, coming back up. And the only time there are those deep dips in my life is when I choose. I choose to separate from God. I choose to separate from the solution outlined here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I choose to become this guy that thinks I can manage well on my own. And we started to have this conversation around step one, and look, I was all in. I was powerless over alcohol. My life was unmanageable. Removing active drinking away, removing alcohol from my life. I couldn't blame it on that. It was solely me running the show. And he started to talk to me about this idea in step two, and just giving you a preface, I grew up in an extremely devout Catholic household. I went to church every Sunday, got ashes, I did Palm Sunday. Like, I was all in. And I was not attracted to that because what I thought I heard is that I was going to be punished for everything that I did and I wasn't going to be forgiven. And the caveat here is that's what I thought I heard. That is not what the priest said. And I just thought, man, I can't have this. And I remember sitting down and he said, tell me about God in your life. And I said, well, my mom tells me God, my dad tells me God. And he says, whoa, I want to hear about your God, not your mom's God and not your dad's God. And I thought, I don't have one. And he said, good. And he talked about this idea of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. And we started going through this idea about electricity the book talks about, and that doesn't make sense to me. And then he starts telling me this idea about the contemporaries of Columbus thinking a round earth preposterous. And he started talking to me about this idea that Christopher Columbus went to the Queen of Spain and said, hey, I need the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. I'm going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean, prove to you the world's round, wind up at the East India Trading Company. And she kind of was like, all right, sounds good. And he just said, that's how I need you to feel about God. And then he broke it down even further for a guy like me. And I did this earlier, and I apologize, but it's just my experience. He said, do you believe that possibly, who knows, ghost, aliens, or Bigfoot could exist? Just by a show of hands, possibly, do you think that could exist? A couple of you, yeah. Some people embarrassed. And he goes, but you don't have any evidence to support that. I said, well, no, not really. He said, and you don't have any evidence to support that God does not exist. I said, well, not really. He says, okay. There you go. And it was like someone had kicked the chair out from behind me and thrown me back 1,000 feet. I was like, oh my God. And we go through this experience, and I turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand. God either is or he is. God is everything in my life today. I'm nothing without God. He brings me to this idea in step 3 where it says we're the principal, he's the agent. This was the keystone through which the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. Keystone is a small stone at the top of an arch. If you take the keystone out, the whole structure collapses. He said, get this straight. Get it straight. He's principal, you're agent. I felt like my sponsor woke up every morning and he said, hey, God, it's Cliff reporting for duty. I just felt like that's what he did. He woke up every morning, looked in the mirror, combed what hair he had left back, and said that. And he was so in tune with it, and he was so ready, and he was so fired up to do it. And he told me I could be fired up too, and he took me through this inventory process, and I want to talk about inventory in amends in these last 10 minutes. He talked about people, institutions, and principles. He asked me if I've ever done a principles inventory before. And I said, no, I've never done a principles inventory before. He said, well, why? And I said, well, long story short, I just didn't do an inventory, period. And he starts to break down this inventory to me, and I'm going to share some stuff with you today, and I want you to know that this is not the way that I feel, this is not the way that I live my life today, but this is stuff that I want to share based on the experience I had. I sit down in Oklahoma and do this inventory with him, and the first thing on my principles inventory is real men don't cry. And the reason real men don't cry is because only gay people cry, and if gay people cry, that means they're weak, and I'm not weak, I'm strong. Contempt prior to investigation. I separate myself from everyone in the room who doesn't Unless you look like me, talk like me, and sound like me, if you came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous before I had this experience and you asked me to sponsor you, I wouldn't sponsor you because we're different. Directly going against what our primary purpose is here. Directly going against. And deep down inside, that's not the real reason behind it. The real reason behind it is I'm so scared of what other people think about me. I'm so scared to be viewed in a light that isn't the light I want reflected or I want shown. And I started to shed this stuff away. Things like that. All this deep, nasty, seated stuff that was separating me from God and me from mankind. And we go on this inventory list outside of resentments, and we talk about my mom, my dad, and my brother. I'm resentful at my mom because she was never there for me. She always yelled at me. She didn't love me. She didn't support me. I'm resentful at my father because my father left my family when I was 11 years old. He was never there for me, never showed up. He didn't teach me what it meant to be a man. Anyone here been taught how to be a man? I'm still waiting for my lesson. I still haven't got it. And I was resentful at my brother because my brother didn't protect me from the nightmares that happened to me when I was out there drinking. And my sponsor sat down. He said, man, let's talk about your mom. Your mom worked 3 jobs so you didn't have to go to school and hand-me-down clothing. So kids wouldn't bully you, so you'd feel a part of. She made sure you had the nicest cleats, the nicest basketball shoes for sports so you could be the top of your game. Because I believe the shoes made the game, not the person. He said, so who's wrong here? Who doesn't love who? He said, okay. He says, let's talk about your dad. He says, before I even knew you, I knew that you hated your dad. And I said, wow. He says, you tell everybody about it. You got daddy issues. Grow up. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, tell me. Because this is the idea, this last column in the inventory Cliff gave me, it asked me what my mistake was, where was I at fault, not what my part was. Because my part on every resentment that I have is that I happen to be alive in the same lifespan of this person. Okay, that's my part. Okay. And he said, man, your father got divorced from your mom who'd been married to you for 15 years, the love of his life, through sickness and in poor. It all just ended right then and there. How would you react? I date a girl for a month and break up with her, and I'm calling my sponsor, oh God, I'm going to be alone the rest of my life. Man. And then my brother, right? My brother didn't protect me from what happened when I was out there. He showed me this other side of the perspective. When I was out there drinking, my brother was a very successful athlete in high school. My parents weren't there to watch my brother sign his letter of intent to go play college athletics because I was intoxicated. My parents missed taking my brother's prom photos because I was intoxicated. My parents missed my brother's senior game because I was intoxicated. So who owes who here? Alcoholics Anonymous is an inside job. God is the most important part of my life today. But sometimes we need really, really good outside perspective. And I get that from my sponsor, and I'm thankful. And we go through the rest of this inventory, and we talk about 6 and 7, and he says it's not the free spot in the bingo card. It says, are we now ready to let God? I've never been ready to let God do anything in my life. And now I'm getting ready to hand over everything to him. And then in step 7, it says, when ready, we say something like this. And that completes this process of surrender for a guy like me. And we get into amends, and my sponsor says, look, if you can't make an amend once a week, don't call me, don't ever call me. I said, well, God. And we started this process of making amends, and I started going through this experience of amending the relationships I had with my mom and my brother and my father, and it lined me up to make amends to my grandmother. And my grandmother was a woman that I couldn't stand. I blamed her for the breakup of my family. If she'd only been a better person, done a better job, I'd be okay. And my grandmother was in a nursing home, bedridden for the last 5 years of her life, and I punished her by not showing up. Sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, I was going to teach her a lesson. And my sponsor said I had to go make that right. And so I went and I saw my grandmother, and when I went there, my Aunt Honey was there. I asked if I'd get a few minutes, and she said, sure. I sat down with my grandmother, and I started this amend process of saying, hey, this is where I've been at fault. This is where I've created harm. And then I asked her if there's anything that she feels that I've done that I need to amend, make right. Not an I'm sorry, but corrective action. And my grandmother just started to cry. And what she did is she opened up a drawer, and it had every picture of all the conferences I had been at. Not speaking at, but just going to be with my sponsor. Me in Canada at Niagara Falls. Me in Oklahoma. Me in Lake Texarkana in Texas. Me in California. Me in Toronto at their Space Needle. They're not as good Space Needle. And my grandmother had been sitting there for 5 years, and she just wanted to talk to me. But I'm going to punish somebody because I've got so much pride. And my grandmother said it would really mean a lot to me if you stopped by once a week and sat down for an hour with me. And I showed up once a week every Thursday, and I watched Reba for an hour with her. Towards the end of it, I'd be yelling at the TV, Reba, no! And the last time I ever saw my grandmother, we were sitting down, and I was there 15 minutes into my visit, and she turned to me. She says, I think I'm finally ready to go to sleep. I'm just really tired. And I said, sure. And I sat there for 45 more minutes until Reba was over, because that's the promise I made. That's what men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what people in Alcoholics Anonymous told me I had to do. Unity. That's what people in Alcoholics Anonymous told me I had to do. And later that week, Saturday night, I left my home group, and my mom called me. She says, hey, I'm sorry, but your grandmother passed away. And I called my dad, and I said, Dad, are you okay? Because, yeah, I lost my grandmother, but my dad lost his mother. And he said, yeah. He said, how are you? I said, so good. So free. And he just went, Lucas, you were the last piece she was waiting on to go home. Don't be the last piece someone's waiting on to go home. Don't just sit there and take. And through that process, right, 10, 11, and 12, this last 2 minutes I've got, I've had a spiritual awakening, but I need to stay awake here. And the way that I stay awake, first and foremost, is I have a commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a home group I go to every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m., except this Saturday. And it's a young people's group. And if you know anything about young people's group, oh my gosh. But let me discern this from you. There's no such thing as Young People's Alcoholics Anonymous. There is simply AA. And if you come to the home group I belong to at 8:30 on a Saturday night, you're going to hear a message based in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous through God Reliance, through the practicing and teaching of the principles outlined in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bank on it. And I sponsor some young men, and sponsorship's been the most beautiful thing in my life. You guys remember the 2000 Rams team, the greatest show on turf? Kurt Warner, Marshall Falk, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt. We don't have that in AA. We've got me, Josh, Victor, Tori, Emily. We're good enough. But I get a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, and just some images, some experiences that happened to me. I've watched men ascend and take the rightful spot in their family. And one of the most beautiful experiences I've had with sponsors, one of the men that I sponsored, we did an inventory, put a woman's name on it. I said, who's that? He said, it's not a woman, it's a little girl. He said, when I was out there drinking, the woman that I was with, we conceived a child, and she didn't allow me to participate in the child's life because of my actions. And I said, okay. I said, have you paid child support? He said, no, why would I do that? I don't raise the kid. And I said, wow, that's great thinking. And so we sent a check every month. And I said, don't send cash because you don't know if cash gets checked. I said, send a check. We sent a check every month, and it started getting cash, started getting cash. And once the pandemic started to break, one of my little knuckleheads, the mother of his child called him and said, hey, I think I'm ready for your daughter to meet you. And this holiday season, I got a postcard with the guy's sponsor, his wife, their infant son, and his 13-year-old daughter. Only in AA, right? If I went and told that to somebody else on the streets, they'd be like, I don't care. But a much more important demonstration of my principles lies ahead in my home occupations, respective homes, occupations, and affairs. I'm from the north. I just speak fast. And I can tell you that tonight at 1740 Weston Avenue, my mom's not going to cry herself to sleep. My mom texted me. She said, "Be safe in Hagerstown." She thinks Frederick's Hagerstown. She thinks anything east of Baltimore is Hagerstown, west of Baltimore is Hagerstown. And my mom, she'll sometimes grab me. She'll say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something. How does God work in your life this way?" And I'm like, oof. And part of this process of making amends to my mom is when I was charged with that, when I participated in that murder and I had to pay the punishment for what I had done, my mom purchased a very expensive lawyer for me, so I got a slap on the wrist. And my sponsor said, "Hey, you're going to have to pay your mom every dollar back for that lawyer." And I said, whoa. I said, "That's what good mothers do." And without skipping a beat, good sons don't kill kids. My sponsor doesn't mince words. And so what happens is I pay my mom on a weekly basis. Sometimes it started off with just change. And I've been able to pay more and more. And I've got a long way to go, and she's not keeping score. She probably says, "Oh, you've only paid $1 thus far." Because what happens is me and my mother commit to sitting down once a week where we just do something. We talk. We play with the dog. We watch a movie. That's where the payment happens. My mom's not worried about the cash. She's worried about her son. My Uncle Bruce told me one time, he said, "One time your father, he came to my house and he said, 'I wish my son would just go away. He's such an embarrassment.'" And he says, "Man, your dad won't shut up about what you're doing in Alcoholics Anonymous now." My dad doesn't care about the money I've made. He cares about the woman I date. He loves my girlfriend, Tori. She's here. Don't ask her if I'm telling the truth. And he doesn't care about the jobs I have, the degrees I've pursued. He just cares about you people and what you've done for his son. And then my brother, the guy that I've just taken everything from, had no relationship with, my brother and I have a beautiful relationship today. And my brother's done very well in the corporate world. And I go to all these corporate parties that sometimes my brother has with all his coworkers. And they're always like, brown-nosing, of course. "Oh, yeah, Josh is the man." And my brother quickly deflects that. "Man, I wish I had God like my brother does, though." My brother's never told us that we're good, but I'm good. And the reason that I'm so fired up for Alcoholics Anonymous all this time later is because I know one day I'm going to get called home to the big meeting upstairs, and I'm going to come face to face with who and what I believe is the God of my own understanding. And on that day, God's going to have one question for me, one question only. "Lukas, on July 28th of 2010, I gave you a gift. What did you do with it?" I hope I have an answer. When I first got sober, I just wanted back on my mom's couch. Now that I've experienced what you have to offer in Alcoholics Anonymous, I just want back in God's house. So thank you for letting me share.